presenting on innovation. So, just a little bit of a start. So the innovation that I kind of explored has been kind of dying out in recent years. I've seen companies, instead of creating new products, they kind of just make their old products better. And this isn't really good for the consumer because you just get the same product over and over. So this is kind of what informed me to look at this. The main thing that I saw this in was Kodak cameras. They were at the top of the photography field and they kind of ran everything, but they dropped off because they refused to innovate. They didn't want to go digital. And this can be seen in their revenue drop. They had $11.4 billion in revenue in 2009, and this dropped to just $1.1 billion in 2021. And this coincided with a drop in R&D spending, which was at $1 billion in 1988. It went down to $324 billion in 2009, and then it again dropped to only $34 million in 2020. So this connection kind of made me want to explore this more and see how this drop in R&D budget, and see if this actually affected innovation of the companies. So this led me to the question of how does the R&D budget affect the growth of companies in terms of new product production? So going into this, my first source was Innovation Invention in the EU business sector. And what this did was it analyzed the spending in the EU business sector to determine if the R&D budget was linked to the innovation of those companies. And what they found was there was a link between R&D spending and innovation of the companies. And this provided the structure for my initial search, because it provided a stable ground that I could search from, and this brought me to different sources along with it. To go with this, I looked at changing R&D models in research-based pharmaceutical companies. So this is by Alexander Schumacher, and what he wanted to see is the difference between pharmaceutical companies before and now, and what the difference was between them. What he found was that instead of cutting costs in different areas, they instead cut costs in the R&D department. And instead of trying to build new things, they spent this money keeping their original patents, which led to a drop in innovation of the pharmaceutical companies. And so what this caused me to look at was how the difference in spending could lead to a drop in innovation, not as a thing. Along with this, it introduced me to the idea of R&D efficiency, how efficiently someone spends their budget, and how this could affect the spending outcome. It's not just a stable number. And with this R&D efficiency, it led me to this article by Eric Stroger Madsen. What he found was he saw a drop in pharmaceutical companies over time, and he wanted to see what the difference was. What he found was that there was a significant, it was a very low R&D efficiency that these companies had. And the main way that he looked at this was with R&D, but he connected it to innovation in a way that quantified it in a number. He did this through looking at it through patents. So this was a stable number that everyone had to deal with. Everyone applied for patents to try and keep their products. And so this gave me something that I could base numbers off of and find a link between two different things. So this led me to my method. I'm doing a correlation. I did a correlation method between the amount spent on R&D. This was for the top 300 companies in the US, and this was because their data was publicly traded, so you could access it. And then I connected it to the total numbers of patents produced from the top 300 companies for patents because they are publicly available. And I did this for the year 2018 because that year's data was very accessible. So in correlating the two numbers, the correlation coefficient was a very strong positive correlation of 0.9251. So this means that generally as you increase one, the other will increase. This is not causation, but they are related in some sense. So this led me to try and look deeper to see if there was a connection between something else, like R&D efficiency. So with this, I looked at the top 10 companies in the US. I looked at the R&D spending, which was scaled from left to right, highest to lowest. I included R&D efficiency as well, and then finally total patents that they applied for in the current year. And along with this, I wanted to look into specific sectors. So first, I wanted to look into the technology sector, which was Microsoft, Intel, Apple, Oracle, and Dell. Again, ordered them left to right from R&D spending. And they had a correlation coefficient of 0.6352. This is not necessarily strong, but it is still a positive correlation. Next, I looked at the internet service providers sector, which was Amazon, Google, Facebook, Cisco, and eBay. I again ordered them left to right with spending. This came out to a correlation coefficient of 0.8763, which is a strong positive correlation between the values. And then for the final sector that I did mechanical engineering. I did Ford Motor, General Electric, Boeing, United Technologies, and Caterpillar. This correlation came out to 0.7184, meaning that there was a strong positive correlation between the values. So now for the discussion. So with the high correlation value, I did want to see what kind of made that actually happen, what caused that to be so high. And this is what happened with patents. So this led me to looking deeper into the top 10 companies. So I didn't see any general trend between the top 10 companies by themselves with patents or with R&D efficiency. I saw really no trend with R&D efficiency that I could kind of quantify with numbers. So this kind of led me to kind of discard it for the next couple of analysis, because I couldn't see a way that it was affecting it specifically. And so this led me to look at specific sectors. The first sector that I looked at was the technology sector. The technology sector was consistently the highest spending sector that had the most money as a total in the top 300 companies. But their correlation coefficient was the lowest out of the three groups at 0.6352. What I saw with this is this was low, but I think the main thing that I saw was that all of the R&D spending amounts were very similar and closely related to each other. So there was no chance to really see a difference between highest and lowest spending, because there was such a short difference in spending. So what this led me to do was look for a different sector to see if I could see a difference between more spending. And this led me to the internet services sector, which did have a significant difference between the top and the bottom one. This coefficient at 0.8763. This value was a lot higher, and I think this is because there was so much of a difference between the top and bottom spenders for the category. This allowed a change between the numbers in spending and patent applications that could visually be seen with a correlation. And along with this led me to see if there was something I could look at with something physical and something that's been around a long time, because this is a somewhat newer sector. This led me to the mechanical engineering field, which ended up having a correlation coefficient of 0.7184. It did kind of surprise me that this value was higher than the technology sector, because it had been around a lot longer, and along with this meant that there was less to patent. But looking into this, the first major difference that I saw was the spending. The spending was significantly lower than the technology field, meaning that this doesn't necessarily mean that less spending, or this doesn't negate the fact that more spending means more patents. This spending was just a lot lower than the other field, and it allowed to see some variability in the spending. Along with this, not all these companies are in the same specific field, like airplanes or motors or something like that. So this allows some variability in the company's spending in patents. But to go along with this, it did still have a positive correlation, kind of strengthening the fact that as you do spend more in R&D, you get more patents along with it. So what does this mean? This provides a link between the two values. It provides a link between the R&D spending and innovation of a company. This is not causation because it was a correlation, meaning one doesn't specifically cause the other, but they are related in some sense. And along with this, it defines the terms for bigger American companies. If you're a larger American company, this can apply to you because you would have more money to spend, and this is based on American companies, meaning if you spend more, you get more innovation. Some limitations for this. It was a somewhat limited scope of observation. I was not able to fully assess factors like the technology that these companies had available, any government help that they got, or other things like R&D efficiency that did affect their outcome of patents or innovation that they had. Along with this is only applicable to higher spending companies. Smaller company data is not readily available to analyze, meaning that it's very hard to get the data unless you're personally involved with the company. So this is only sort of available to those high level companies where the data is actually available. Future research. I saw two major things. The first one is kind of an analysis of this data over time. So how this value can actually change over time through peaks and troughs of the business cycle, along with going with like depressions or peaks in spending. And the second one was the analysis of each sector and what causes them to change, or specifically change, instead of just having difference in money, what actually causes them to actually change.
Terrific. Thank you. Let me ask you 3 questions here and then we'll be finished. So for the first question, how did you determine which results that were generated through your method were the most important in determining your final understanding? How did you make that determination?
So first off, I had those top 300 companies, and I kind of wanted to go towards the top because they are the big names. And with those top companies, I looked for kind of relationships that each could have, like different sectors or groups that they belong to. And through this, I decided to look at the biggest 3 that could have a correlation. The first one, because it was just highest and well-known. Second, because it's extremely important to kind of humans really, or now. And then third, because because it's kind of been around a long time.
Good, and then a follow-up question to that are, how did the limitations in your method or data influence your final conclusion?
That's right.
How did the limitations in your method or data influence your final conclusion?
So the limitations for my method, it wasn't allowed to simply provide causation. It provided a correlation between the values. So this did not provide like a definite link, but it did provide a link between the values that could connect them together. So this did ultimately bring my argument further, but it wasn't like a definite thing that could definitely be.
Okay, and then the final question, if you could revisit the whole research process from start to finish, is there anything that you would do differently? And if so, why would you change it?
I think I would sort of change my research a little bit. I would look into, instead of everything in a broader sense, I would sort of look into a specific field, because then I could analyze what sort of changed each company's output for innovation, instead of just a broader sense difference between all of them. Because looking into a specific category would allow me to Yeah, see the differences, see government help, also see technology that they have available instead of just kind of saying that it's there. And then also analyze the R&D efficiency that I wanted to originally that I couldn't see because of everything together. It would allow me to go more in depth with everything and kind of connect everything better.
Terrific.